right, Tim, that was a great conversation with the CEO of the New England Free Jacks, Alex Magleby. But now it's time for the partner rundown. Let's get right into it. So we talked to Alex about presenting rugby as a safer alternative to football, which he pushed back on. But do you think it's a strategy worth pursuing?
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised that he pushed back on it, to be honest with you. But I guess when you break it down, he was talking more about specifically the safety issue. And he's right not to say, hey, we're a safer alternative to football. But I do think that the youth sports level is really competitive. And kids have so many different options. Youth participation overall is going down, even though there's more options, more sports. We see the push that lacrosse is making with Premier League lacrosse. So with that in mind, you have to do whatever you can to build up participation at the grassroots level. And so if positioning yourself against football and as an alternative to that is lucrative or appeals to families, appeals to parents, then you should definitely do that. And overall, I think it's going to help the game of rugby grow in this country.
You know, where I don't disagree with you is the fact that you have to do anything in your power when you're a nascent league and you're trying to break through to parents who have so many options and have a limited amount of money. But where I don't like the approach is that safety piece, because you're kind of hanging your hat on that one thing, right? So the challenge with that is, like, if years from now it comes out that actually it's not safer, it's just as challenging as, you know, head injuries are in football, then now you have led a whole generation of players down that path. It really comes down to values, and the values that resonate with your audience and with your community. And in this case, the values that he espouses are, you know, those of good sportsmanship, of you know, athleticism, of supporting, just being part of something new, and that being those core pillars that he is excited about sharing with rugby and with his fans in rugby. And so I think hanging his hat on that one piece around safety can kind of be a double-edged sword, and maybe not something they want to go down.
Well, Jay, you're starting to hit on one of my favorite things that Alex talked about, which was how he's building a community around his club. Do you think community first growth is a real possibility, or just something we like to talk about on podcasts?
I don't think it's something that we just talk about on podcast, Tim. I think community is really important, and a very important part of the way that businesses are built today. And let's just think about it on an atomic level of why that is. Well, how much does it cost you to acquire a new customer versus how much does it cost you to retain and sell to an existing customer? Every single time that existing customer is going to be cheaper for you to work with. So where does community play into it? Well, community is the way that you get to engage that existing customer in new and interesting ways for you to be able to really support them over the lifetime of their relationship with you. And so the challenge here is that, yes, it takes a lot of work in the early days to build that community, but in the long term, it pays off a lot of dividend. And that's why you see social media companies do so well with community, because that network effect builds your brand and builds those relationships for you.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point with an existing brand when they're thinking about how do we monetize existing customers versus new customers. But what about the new brands that are out there? They're faced with all new customers. And this is really the opportunity, being community first or trying to build a cult brand, where you can drive a wedge in against your competition. Think about like a Barstool Sports, for example. They were able to drive a wedge in against ESPN because they realized there's things we can do that they just can't talk about. And it was Roger Goodell at the NFL and Dave Portner trying to create a rivalry. What's he doing with his newest endeavor, with his finance and stock picks? He's trying to create a wedge against Warren Buffett, one of the most prolific investors of all time. And so that's how he's creating community. That's how he's leveraging that to build a new brand. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. It's not just about the community you're building, but it's also about picking the right enemy so that you can find your audience.
Yeah, Tim, and another one of the draws is that they have athletes like Patrick Chung and Nate Ebner as investors in the Free Jacks. And we're seeing this trend now where you've got athletes like Mia Hamm and Serena getting involved in the NWSL's LA expansion. Why do you think we're seeing this trend of athlete investors in new sports teams?
Well, it's time. It's time for the tables to shift. I think the opportunity is there more than ever was before because of these new leagues. So you've seen this massive growth that has shown the core four sports or core five in the US as good financial investments, which justifies that. And other people want to participate that, especially the players who played such a important part in that growth. I mean, we talked to Michael Redd on this show, and he talked about it was a battle between the millionaires and the billionaires. Well, which side of the table would you rather be on? And so I think it's exciting. It takes a really long-term outlook. And I think for a lot of these folks, even though I was saying they see the opportunity from a financial standpoint, right now on the ground level, they're just excited to get involved in something that they're passionate about.
Well, and they can start to think about it from that long-term perspective because most of them are in their, 30s or maybe early 40s, and they're looking at this as building generational wealth. And that's something that you hear a lot of players, both on this show and elsewhere, talk about what they want to do with their investments is build that generational wealth. Well, look at the NFL, right? Most of those teams were passed from generation to generation. The folks that own it now are third generation owners of those NFL teams. This is not just something they're trying to invest in for themselves, but they're hoping that as these leagues grow, as the winds change, especially as soccer starts to become really important or rugby starts to become really important, they are making an investment today that hopefully their grandchildren are going to be team owners for. And I think that sort of long-term thinking should be commended. That's obviously not the only thing that these athletes are investing in, but it is one of the properties that they are looking to from a long-term holding standpoint. And yeah, absolutely, they should share in that. They should be owners. It shouldn't just be the billionaires that do so.
So taking a little bit different direction, I recently watched HBO's Weight of Gold, which details the mental health challenges U.S. Olympians face in pursuit of athletic excellence. Jay, I know you've seen the documentary. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Tim. I mean, this was a beautifully made film by director Brett Rapkin and Michael Phelps, and yet it left me really sad and angry. I mean, one of the things that we as a culture of US sports do is we build up these heroes and we celebrate them before they, go on to compete at the highest stage, and they prepare for 4 years to go out there and compete. And then 40 seconds later, they're done. And Apollo Ono, the speed skater, and the Olympian spoke about, hey, unless you get gold, like nobody's talking to you. Silver, bronze, get out of here. Right. And so we expect this excellence. And yet when these folks come back and they have competed at the highest level for our entertainment and our glory, we don't support them in the right way. And so I think even just from a fan perspective, that needs to change. The way that we celebrate them before, we need to celebrate them and support them in their mental health challenges after.
Yeah, Jay, and this is a lot of the reason why we started the game plan. It was to be able to highlight those stories and really focus on and feature the full human, not just the athlete we came to know and love on the field. And I think it starts at a much younger age. And that's why I loved what Patrick Ianni, former MLS player and U.S. Olympian, had to share with us and really has made his life focus, which is how can I help kids at a very young age understand what sport's about, understand how to develop and grow in a sport, and just be more self-aware. And I hope that can pay off in the long term, and only time's going to tell. But even the fact that this documentary exists and is out there and is bringing up this important narrative is a great thing. And so we'll see. Now that the Olympics have been delayed a year and there's just more focus on this, it could be an opportunity for the Olympians to rally, realize the value they create, and go to the Olympics with that to try and experience some of that upside.
Yeah, Tim, you're absolutely right. Wouldn't that be something if this was the flag that the U.S. Olympic team carried forward? And look, you and I are going to continue having these conversations about these topics here on the Game Plan. And I'm just grateful that I get to have this every week with you. So thank you so much, Tim. And I look forward to seeing you on the next rundown.
Thanks, Jay.